this might be difficult for me to explain without reading the notes that I've written down, because my video recorder is not working, so I can't simultaneously read and speak. But I've been recently thinking about a lecture by Jordan B. Peterson called, something about facing your darkest feelings about life. And I was also thinking about the Bible in general, with Eve and Cain, and just the archetypes of the bad child, which there's a lineage of. For instance, it starts in the Garden of Eden. There's Adam and Eve. And Eve, basically gets both of them killed. Because instead of, saying something like saying, oh, look, this snake told me this other thing, that's kind of weird, isn't it? Like, she just apparently didn't care about them dying and just gave them this fruit to eat. And then, and then they had children. And then they had Cain and Abel. And then Cain is like supposed to be the archetype of the murderer, the archetype of Jeffrey Dahmer's, the archetype of Columbine shooters, the archetype of Virginia Tech shooters, like the supposedly random act of violence. But as I've been thinking about it, like before, if I read the story of Cain, I wouldn't know why it happened. I could just say, oh, he was jealous, that's it. But that's just it's such an easy answer, right? It's such an easy answer that doesn't really solve anything, because if you just say, oh, it's because he's jealous, you're not preventing it from happening again. You don't know why his jealousy just led him to murder his brother. A lot of people are jealous. They don't kill people just because they're jealous. And jealousy is not an evil thing. So you could say it's not jealousy. It's more than that. So I'm going to get back to that. So I've been thinking about Jordan B. Peterson talking about, the darkest feelings of a person. And also was thinking about David Wood, because he has a dark history where he was kind of like a Jeffrey Dahmer, where he practically murdered his father, except, his father survived the attack. And he was also an atheist, and then he also had to convert to Christianity. And he, as well as many other people, referenced Sigmund Freud about the correlation between atheism and fatherlessness, and then that your sentiment toward your father or toward God is an expression of how you feel toward your father or your God, respectively. And it's all related to each other. The atheism thing, the fatherless thing, the Cain story, the Texas shootings, Virginia Tech, Columbine shooting, they all have things in common. It has to do with fatherlessness. It has to do with this idea that, that your father's not there. What do you mean by father? What do you mean you're fatherless? What it means is that you're not getting the attention that you want or that you need. Because people need attention, they want attention, it's not evil. If you take away all the evil aspects about Cain, if you take away all the evil aspects about the Virginia Tech shooters, or David, in the attacks, there's nothing evil about it. It's very natural. Everybody needs attention. Everyone wants attention. Attention is very broad, right? But then the things that touch upon that is things that you need, the things that are essential for a godly life, for a healthy life. Love is attention. Intimacy is attention. Compassion is attention. All these things that you need in your life to make you a healthy, sane person and happy person is basically a form of attention. You know, community is attention. When you're a tight-knit community as opposed to complete strangers who are not involved with each other. So even if you had a father, you know, let's say, technically speaking, you had a father. Technically speaking, he was around, but he wasn't that involved with you. He didn't give you that attention. You didn't have a social life together. You didn't have a social life with a significant other. You didn't have a social life with your neighbors. You didn't have friends, right? They physically exist. When you walk out the door, there's people next to you, living next to you, but they don't talk to each other, you know? It means you're isolated. You're practically alone. You're practically not with people. They practically don't exist. It's like if you have a child and you just give birth to this child and then you just put them in their room and then totally ignore them, you know, you don't live a life with them. You practically don't exist. The same way, if you were physically not there, you know, that you wouldn't exist. You have no father, even though he physically exists somewhere else in the world. But even if he existed right in your same household, if he was totally neglectful and ignored you, didn't have a life with you, didn't conversate with you, didn't live life together with you, you know, didn't talk about each other's lives, didn't talk about each other's feelings, didn't live together as partners, but live as independent strangers, then you're going to become Jeffrey Dahmer. Then you're going to become Ted Bundy. You're going to become Charles Manson. Because when you look at Cain and Abel, there's nothing that's leading up to the story to suggest that there's something wrong with Cain. You know, all it says is that Abel was born, Cain was born, they're brothers, and one was a herder of sheep, the other one was a crop farmer, and then one day they decided to give offerings to God, and then God showed favoritism to Abel, and then Cain felt bad. Does that sound evil to you? No, not to me. It sounds very normal. You know, you feel bad because someone's getting the attention and you want attention, but you're not getting it. And again, to reiterate, Abel and Cain, there's nothing between them that's being said in the story other than the fact that, you know, they're brothers, and then the one was a herder of sheep, the other one was a crop farmer. Is it so crazy to imagine that their relationship together was not very close at all? That they were very separate? So then it was like Cain is isolated. You know, they're practically not brothers in that case, if that's the case. They're like strangers and they're competitors. And this also brings to mind the idea of capitalism. Because there's people who are such capitalism gimmick enthusiasts who always say, oh, it's about capitalism. Capitalism is the best. It's all about capitalism. That's all you need. Communism is bad. Socialism is bad. But they don't realize that if it's merely about capitalism, you end up in a situation of Cain and Abel, where you have all these things that you want. You're successful. You have a wife. You have kids. You have friends. You have family. You don't have time for anyone else. And since you're not part of a community type society, you're just about pleasing yourself and living in your own place. What about people like Cain, or people who are poor, who don't have a crop farm, who don't have people around them, who don't have good looks, so they can't be around, they don't have a love life, they don't have friends, people don't have a reason to talk to them, no one's forced to, no one has an obligation to, so they're just isolated from the world. They're practically dead to the world. And then they have to watch everyone enjoy their lives, to have a love life, to be pretty, to be with pretty people, to have friends, to have a social activity, to have family, to have people to talk to. And then you have nothing for yourself. So then, of course, as any child does, as people have seen throughout thousands of years, what children do to get attention as a last resort is whatever they can. They break things, they scream, they behave badly, even though they might realize what good and bad is. They know that it's wrong, but they have no choice. Because at the end of the day, people aren't pursuing happiness for the sake of knowledge and understanding. They're pursuing knowledge and understanding for the sake of being happy, to obtain happiness, to know how to maintain happiness. But if you have all this knowledge, all this understanding, but you don't get the things that you want, you don't have a love life, you don't have a girlfriend, you don't have a wife, you don't get to eat tasty food, you have to eat disgusting, like, tasteless food. You don't have a social life, you can't go outside and talk to people because everyone is already with their friends. You're not living in a community. Everyone has their personal friends who they grew up with, and they don't have room for you in their circle. They don't have room for you in their events. You're just a total outcast because there's not enough quote-unquote room for you. But that's because the structure of the society is so competitive, so capitalist. It's not a coincidence that after Jesus came and, shed the light or whatever, that the apostles lived together. I mean, who's to say that they couldn't have just simply lived as they were already living, like, let's say, in a capitalist way? Each one of them lived in their own homes and, kept to themselves. But instead, they lived together. They're closer. And then again, with that same concept, they had more attention. They gave each other attention, so there's more love there. And you see, in a family that gives each other more attention, is more close-knit, things like Jeffrey Dahmer is less likely to happen. When you look at the families or the social situations of such people like Jeffrey Dahmer, or Ted Bundy or whatever, you could probably see, I can bet on that the pattern is something like fatherlessness. Or if they have a father, it's practically like they don't have a father, because there's no relationship, there's no interaction, there's no love, there's no attention. And if someone who wants to gain attention, if they want attention from God and they think God exists to the point where, they think God is literally there, maybe they'll threaten or commit suicide, because it's like, okay, God can see me commit suicide, I want his attention. But if they want people's attention, then you have Virginia Tech, then you have Columbine, then you have the Texas massacre shooting. They want to be in front of other people, to be seen by other people, because they want their attention. They want to be seen. They want to know that people know that they exist. This is why the people go out to kill other people, This is why people go out to hurt other people. Because if they don't hurt other people, they just hurt themselves. They don't get anyone's attention. It's like a form of love. It's like a sign of life. Imagine if you were a ghost and then no one heard you, no one saw you, no one paid any attention to you. If you're in a dating scene, everyone's with somebody, everyone's smiling, happy, and they're all talking about love, and they're kissing each other, and they're making love to each other, and then they live their life every single day, happy as you can be. But you have no one pays attention to you, and they don't have to. So doesn't that suck for you? So what are you going to do about it? And not only that, but you don't have friends to distract you, to have a life with. You don't have a family. Let's say you have a bad family, you can't turn to your family. Let's say you even live with your family, but they're abusive, they're neglectful. It all ties together, the fatherlessness, the isolation, not having a close relationship, not getting attention, Cain. And you might say that people don't deserve to get free things, but for instance, I have a cat that I found during during work. I used to work at this place, and there was this parking lot, and it was asphalt, and there was a hole in the ground, apparently, because I was not feeling it, and I just decided to stop working and take a break, walked outside, and I heard a cat, and I couldn't ignore the cat, the baby cat meowing. It sounded like, in my mind, that it needed help. It was like a lost kitten or starving. So I looked around, and there's this hole in the street ground, and then I can hear that there's something coming from that, and I see something, and I grabbed it, and I took it to a vet. My friend helped me, and then now it's been with me, with my relative for years. The cat didn't say to me, oh, if you save me, I'll give you money, or I'll do something for you, I'll have sex with you. I didn't need the cat to say that. I didn't need the cat to give me anything for me to do that. Life is not quote-unquote capitalism. If life was just quote-unquote capitalism, it wouldn't be, a life of love, happiness, and society, this golden rule, this Christian life. It wouldn't be that. You already have this tax system where it goes toward a common goal that benefits people as a whole. I mean, is that capitalism? Judaism has this thing where 10% of the crops are withheld and given to the poor. Is that capitalism? Is family capitalism? It's like Ben Shapiro said, in small doses, people practice socialism at home. You share bank accounts with your wife. You give, your fridge is open to your children. You don't say that they owe you something. You don't charge them. Because love isn't like that. Love is just giving people attention. You don't give someone attention. You don't give them affection or intimacy only after an agreement where they answer you and say that they will give you something in return for it. You just do it. That's what being a friend is. That's what being, a boyfriend or girlfriend is. It's just about being together. It's about, if anything, what they're giving you is the equivalent. So in a relationship, if you want a relationship to be with someone, the equivalent is that they're being with you also. So then it helps that you're on the same page, and then you have same principles and same values. But at the end of the day, what you're getting is what they're getting. It's an equivalent exchange. But if you had it where you didn't give anything to anyone because you felt that they quote unquote didn't deserve it, and it didn't make you feel bad, then what you would have is a world of prostitution where everything is just buying and selling. Buying and selling boyfriends, buying and selling love and intimacy, buying and selling friendship, buying and selling a social life. Because at the end of the day, like when a lot of people say that they don't deserve it, are they really saying it out of the fact that it's about the person they're talking about? Or isn't it oftentimes the case that those people who say that other people don't deserve it is because it bothers them? It says something about them. It says that they don't want to share. It says that they don't want to give something because they feel like they're more worthy of another person. But even if you're a Christian, this is a parable that disproves the idea that, you should withhold things from people just because you think you worked hard, or as if that's the end-all scenario. It's a parable of this owner, this landowner, who pays these random people in public to work on his farm or whatever, and he pays them like 1 coin. But then near the end of the day, that owner finds this other guy, and he pays him the same amount to work the remainder of the day, which was less time and less work than the rest of the people. So then the rest of the people felt entitled, so to speak. They were saying, oh, what's the deal? You paid us this 1 coin for us to work the entire day, but you paid this guy the same amount as us, and he only worked for like an hour. But then I can see how that could be rightfully offensive, but at the same time, depending on the context, it's also not. It's also selfishness and entitlement, because this parable is saying and proving the point that the landowner says, well, this is my money and this is my farm, and I asked you if you agreed to work the whole day for this coin, and you said yes. So, and I asked this guy if he agreed to work for the rest of the day for the same coin, and he said yes. So, why are you angry? Is it because I'm generous that you're angry? Because you didn't disagree. I didn't force you to. You agreed to it. So then why are you angry that I'm being generous with this person? So this is the kind of sentiment that people have in some instances when they look at people, look at poor people, look at people without a girlfriend, and people want to give them money, give them food, or give them a girlfriend. What do people do? What do parents do, like when they're matchmaking their children, or friends matchmake their friends? Aren't they just, quote unquote, giving them this thing that they didn't necessarily have to, quote unquote, work for? Because they're, good enough people? So some people, they have different hearts. It's like equality is not about, making someone work the same hours or lift the same amount of weight. It's about looking at their heart and their capabilities and see how much they're suffering. So that in the outward appearance, it might be seeming like they are slower, doing less work, but actually, perhaps for you it's easier because you're physically more fit, or for some whatever reason you have less on your mind and you have a family and you have a lover. But imagine what it's like for someone who is physically the same as you, but they don't have anyone to go to back at home. There's no one there. They don't have a love life, they don't have distraction, they don't have smiles, they don't have an activity, they have no family, they have no friends. So all they can do in life is work all day, stare into the wall, have nothing to think about, have nothing to talk about, have no one to talk to, have no one to be spoken to by, no one who cares about them, no one gives them attention, and they go home and it's just emptiness, and they have to do this every single day, and then you just act like you don't know why they're complaining or why they're not happy, while you're totally enjoying life with your beautiful wife or boyfriend and your, loving parents in your neighborhood, or you go out and have activities every weekend or after every work shift. It's not hard to imagine why Cain felt the way he did given the circumstances. It's not hard to imagine why. Even when you get to the story of Eve, what you do is you ask yourself, for yourself and for your own time, for your own era, how it makes sense to think about it, right? Because as the story of Cain and Abel, it leaves much to the imagination. It doesn't say much about the relationship between Cain and Abel, unless you do look at the fact that there isn't much to say about them, and then suddenly Cain wants to kill Abel, which implies certain things. There's certain implications to that. As I said, that their relationship wasn't close, it was distant, it was isolated. Cain is not happy, he doesn't have happiness in his life. So with Eve also, we can just presume things, we can just make these hypotheses and see these scenarios, why instead of Eve telling her husband that some snake told her that, essentially God lied, right? Why instead of that did she just simply take this fruit, eat of it, and then give it to her husband? Is it crazy for me to suggest that if perhaps the relationship between Eve and Adam were so close enough, that it would be to the point where Eve would have said something? If they were in a close relationship where they got attention and gave attention, perhaps Eve would have said to Adam, without having eaten the apple, just brought, not even bringing the apple, just went to Adam and said, Adam, a snake told me that we wouldn't die if we ate the apple? Or why didn't she go to God and say the same thing? Because I feel like if you look into families, into relationships, that and how they're close or how they're not close, how they interact or how they respect each other, that's how they behave. You see this more likely they will be someone who brings attention to these things and who also don't keep secrets with each other if they're closer to each other, if they love each other more, if they give each other more attention. But if you don't give each other attention, if you don't love each other, you don't respect each other, you don't have a close life, you're isolated, you don't talk to each other, you don't live together but separate, then you're more likely to hold things, withhold information, to kind of keep it, on the low, or just not share this kind of information because like you're independent, you're not necessarily each other's friends or lovers, you're not each other's family, you don't know each other that well. So it's like you have darkness in you. Your outlook on life is way more grim. It's like you're alone. It's like you're against the world and the world's against you, because at the end of the day, it's like a competition. If something goes wrong, something hits the fan, then you have to look out for yourself. It's every man for himself. You know that they're not going to help you, and so then why should you help them? You're not living together. You're not happy together. So if the apocalypse happened, capitalists, what would they do? They would essentially try to save themselves. And then what that implies is that, they're leaving you to just burn. As much as they like to say that they're good people, they like to help people, but in the moment they're just gonna run for their lives, and then they're gonna ditch you because the society, the community, the social kind of environment is not tight knit. It's not like, even in my neighborhood, there's so many houses next to me. They're so close together. It's not like a rural area where the closest person is like a mile away. We have so many houses next to each other, but yet again, every single day, there's no one outside. During the day, during the night, there's hardly anyone outside. No one's talking to each other. There's no neighbor is actually socializing with each other. They're hardly neighbors in a social sense. They're only neighbors in a physical sense that they're adjacent to each other. And this is how you get neighbors. Like even this is consistent even in the case of Rand Paul, or Ron Paul, I forgot his name, the senator, the politician, that they said that suddenly his neighbor attacked him. And sure, they had different political views and all, but they're supposed friends who are close friends or whatever, who have opposing political views, but they get along much finer than that. And you might want to say that, maybe it's just a matter of time before that kind of incident happens to them too. Doesn't matter how close you are, which, okay, you could say that, but then perhaps it would have delayed, perhaps would have ameliorated or lessened the kind of confrontation, because apparently even in the story, that article about that senator and his neighbor, they didn't talk to each other. I mean, they didn't argue with each other. They didn't have anything against each other, but they didn't have any kind of social life. It was just like isolatedness. It was total isolation, separateness. Like, you against me, we're competitors. We're not a community. We're not a family. We're not friends. We're not lovers. It's all consistent. Like, everything I'm saying is consistent to that same idea. Whether it's fatherlessness, whether it's, you don't have a lover or a social life, you don't have friends, you don't have family, or if you have a family, if you have, pals, quote unquote, pals, or if you are even in a relationship, a sexual relationship, perhaps they're abusive, or that they're neglectful, or they ignore you somehow, or you just don't have that much of a relationship, so that you should be with someone else where you actually talk to each other and you live together, rather than being two separate entities who just happen to meet each other sometimes. It's like the saying in marriage is that two become one. They're no longer two, they're one, right? But you have to live that way, right? You can't just say that you're one, right? You just can't say that you're together, but because if you don't live as a unit, if you're not like constantly on the same page and you're not communicating with each other, you're not that close, then you're not really one. You're not really a couple. You're not really friends. You're not really a family. you see the differences in how close the family is, how if they eat with each other at the table, and not only that, but they speak to each other, as opposed to like my family where they just go to separate rooms, and my mom's abusive to me so that when she wants something fixed, she just starts yelling at me and starts calling my name and tells me to do things without even giving me a second to respond, even though I would be willing to help her, even though I am helping her. Even when I come to her and I do help her, she's still yelling at me to do something, and I show her how to do it and I do it for her, but then she's still saying that she doesn't understand and she's yelling at me to do it, to just explain it to her, even though I did. So it's like not respectful at all. But then when time comes and then we're just, a day passes by and then she's just in the same kitchen as me. I want to have a conversation with her, or I'm just saying something like I see her do something, put something in the microwave, and I say, "Are you supposed to put that in the microwave?" But she doesn't respond to me. It's not mutual respect. I respond to her, but she doesn't respond to me. Or when I respect my sister and I don't take her things and I clean up after myself, but she doesn't clean up after herself. She leaves dishes in the sink. She doesn't flush the toilet, so I have to see this stuff every time. But then if she were to ever see me leave that stuff, she would make fun of me. She would talk about me to her relatives. She would make a big deal out of it. So then that's like insincerity. That's not love. That's isolation. That's competitiveness. That's hate. The same way. So I also bring up the fact of animal cruelty and pornography. So if you allow pornography and animal cruelty in the world, and then people know this, and not only that, but you are a pornographer, you are a porn star, or you are someone who slaughters animals, and then you go to someone and say that you love them, or then you even smile at them and you do all these things that supposedly are loving and kind, they see that it's bullshit. Your love is not sincere, genuine love, because I just saw you murder this animal. I just saw you in a gangbang, for whatever reason, whether it's for money or you're a whore, how can you say that you're my wife or you're my husband, that you love me, that you give me undivided attention? How can you say that I'm special? How am I supposed to feel? It's not real. You're fake. You're not genuine. This is not love. You're a liar. People can, you can manipulate someone's mind. You can even seduce their heart, but you can't lie to the soul. The soul knows. It knows, and God says to be holy, and that He says that your temple is a holy temple. Do not desecrate it. So what I know, the harmful, destructive effect pornography has, or simply having these billboards where women are in lingerie and men are showing their nipples and just in panties and they're in sexual positions. It desensitizes people. It says it's not that special. So then when you have it with someone, it's not that special. You don't feel special. Just like how if someone slept with 1,000 people and then they're with you now and you're having sex, you don't feel that special. You're like a sloppy 1,000. You're not just a sloppy second, you're a sloppy 1,000, which is why virginity is an issue. Which is why purity is an issue. And you realize if someone's thinking about someone else while you're having sex with them, you don't feel loved. It's a lie, it's a sham. And if I look at you and you're saying you're so righteous, you're so adamant and you're so vehement and so vicious, talking against people who are supposedly animal cruelty, beating their dogs or beating their children or whatever, but then when it comes time to these cows and these pigs or these chickens, you just act like they don't matter, they don't have feelings the same way a dog has feelings. So then when I look at you and you tell me that you're about love, or that we're a friend, your family, you're a lover, or whatever, your life is about happiness, I see that you're a liar, that you're full of shit, that you're not genuine. So then how does that make me feel? That makes me feel alienated. It makes me feel like life is a lie. And it makes you feel like, you're in danger almost even. You're in darkness. So you're going to be a Cain. You're going to have Dahmer-like sentiments. You're going to have Ted Bundy-like, Charles Manson-like mentalities, the outlook in life. You're going to see the world as a morbid, grim, bizarre place where people smile and they say they're about love, and sometimes they are about love, but then the next they're Nazis. And that's a perfect example. They said that Nazis, one day they will go to work in the concentration camps, they'll shoot people, they'll burn people alive, they'll gas people. And then when they come home, they have these families, they have these children. They smile, they kiss their family, they say, I love you. And they take care of their families. And, you know, who's to say that they didn't actually feel love or whatever to those families? But then when it came to Jews, they just didn't give a shit. So then, if that Nazi came to you and they said, oh, I'm a good person, I love you, and then I'm a good neighbor, we're friends, you would see that, you would take that as insincere, as a total lie, like someone with a mask. You know, your soul knows that it's just, because even if your mind was manipulated and your heart was seduced by them, because, you know, they had a soft voice and they were kind, sure, and they were physically attractive, and they used the right words, but your mind is connected to your heart, and your heart is connected to your soul, and your soul knows that it's a lie, that it's a total abomination, it's total desecration. And that's why you can't manipulate people, you can't trick, you can't cheat society by saying, oh, let's just be capitalists and keep to ourselves and not talk to each other, just get rich on our own. You know, we don't have to worry about Bob in the corner or Kenny McCormick, who lives in a shed and has no family, has no friends. And if he's single, that's his problem. That's not my problem. I don't care. And what happens? They try to get attention like any human being would, like any child would in a family, because we're one big family. And if you have some children, some siblings where they're isolated, they're ignored, they're not loved, no one pays them attention, no one helps them out, no, they're not included, they're not participating, they're not cared about, they're not desired, they're gonna get attention one way or another. Whether it's by massacring people, whether it's by raping people, whether it's by, well, maybe not rape, but just like rape, probably most likely if that happens in the case of the lack of a love life. But killing is in general, right? And stealing also is like, stealing more likely to be so if in the case of poverty, because poverty is also the lack of attention. Like, I look at everyone and I see, oh, everyone has these nice things, but I don't, and no one cares about it. And then people expect me to go about my daily life and go to work 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, and come home to absolutely nothing, you know? And maybe if I had a wife and we were beautiful, we made love every day, then that would be fine. I could live with that, you know? It's not much, but it's just what I need. But you can't do that without social life. You can't do that without a love life. If all you do is go to work and you're just a machine, that's what you become. You become a heartless vegetable machine. And people act like they don't know why people feel that way. They don't know why people become that way. They do know why. It's just that they don't care, because in the time, ignorance is bliss. They're enjoying themselves. They're indulging. They don't want to worry about problems in the world. Matter of fact, no one even cared about terrorism until they're the ones who were getting bombed. No one cared. Americans didn't care about the Holocaust, even though they knew about it, until they realized that, it's going to come to them eventually. Capitalists won't care about, oh, maybe we should, reform societal structure and government and not be entirely capitalist, until they realize that, capitalism by itself is not going to make people charitable, or, is not going to help everyone. It's not the solution, like the total end-all solution. Because people say, oh, we're charitable, charity, we give. No one's forcing anyone to be charitable. No one's forcing donations or anything. No one's forcing, and even if they give financial donation, what about the fact that someone's just physically unattractive and they can't be with someone? Don't they need help? Don't they need assistance? What about people? Because that's another kind of poverty. Another kind of poverty is, not having a family life. They need a family. Even an adult, if they don't have a family because their family was just like dysfunctional, so beyond repair that they couldn't be together. The father couldn't be with the son couldn't be with the sister couldn't be with the mother. So they need kind of like foster parents. They need substitutes. They need a belonging. People need a belonging. This is what it's all about. Cain, he needed a belonging. Even Eve, you can say, theoretically needed a belonging, and they weren't close enough. It exposes the deficiencies and the flaws or the errors or the laziness or whatever, the mistakes in a relationship where you didn't do this or you did this and you shouldn't have. And the thing about the capitalist thing too, Abraham, it says in the story that he had a big army. Like he had all these people, these men to fight for him. But when he went to the desert with Sarah, he didn't bring them along. They didn't come with him. He was alone with Sarah. And, it even shows this that, one time they were approached or they entered the city and there was this king, there were these people. Abraham realized that he might be killed because he might want to take his wife. And, for that sake, he asked Sarah to say that Sarah is his sister instead of his wife so that he doesn't get killed or prevents, avoids that situation. And then God comes at the nick of time to say, don't sleep with that woman because that's the man's wife. And, the only reason why this happens because, you were going to kill him or whatever. So that shows how alone he was. He didn't have his army. But again, while they were in the desert, these strangers come and then Abraham wants to be hospitable. So he tells Sarah to make cakes. And what's their context? What's their living situation like in that moment? They're in the desert and they don't have their army. They're just by themselves. That means only they're carrying stuff. Maybe carrying stuff with two camels at most, each person. So Sarah's carrying 2 camels or 3 camels. Abraham's carrying 2 or 3 camels with a leash. And how much can you carry with that, right? So then Abraham, he wants to share whatever limited supplies he has to these people to be hospitable, to share, to be loving. It's like we're a family, Imagine, in a case where the world had limited supplies versus a world where there were unlimited supplies. So if there was unlimited supply of anything you would want, of course you should be able to say you should just give it to people, right? And perhaps you don't have to give it to people because people could just get it somewhere else. But if they were in a situation where they couldn't just get up and get it by themselves, sure, you would be giving the thing to the person, right? Or you should expect to be able to give something to the person. And in the case where not only the thing is like food or video game, but also physical appearance, like in a world where, everyone had the option to customize their physical appearance or to give that customization to someone so that they could be attracted to have a love life or whatever, people will do that for them, right? Okay, so compare that with a world where supplies are limited. People want to say, the more... There's a saying where it's like you're only as good as you are in your worst scenario, in your worst times, right? So when... And also the Bible, says trial and tribulation. Trial and tribulation. The trials and tribulations shows what kind of person you are. It shows how far you would go. It shows, what kind of reward you deserve, or it sure shows whether or not you're a good bad person, a good or bad person. And so when you have limited supplies in the world, imagine being stranded on an island, right? And you're stranded on an island with these people, and you're gonna die, at least eventually from passing away out of old age. But if you have a limited supply of food, are you not going to share with each other equally? Are you not going to split it in half so that everyone has an equal share? Compare that with someone who has a mentality and a sentiment where they're saying, I'm going to keep it all for myself. I'm going to let them die. They're not bad people. They haven't been mean to me. They've been great to me, but I'm just going to keep it to myself. I don't care about them. But if you had a close enough relationship, and if you had a loving relationship, I mean, you should be able to feel that togetherness, like we're in the same boat. If we die, we die together. Like those superhero movies, or just movies where even like you're a wanderer, or you're stranded, or you're lost, and then you enter like a Japanese village, in this samurai village, like the Last Samurai or whatever. You know, they might not have everything in the world, they might not have a lot of food, but you know, they see you as a human being and as a part of the human family, the family of human beings. And you know, this guy is worse off than we are. We have food, you know, let's share it with him. We might not be full because we shared some food with him, so that we're all going to be kind of half full, half empty, and still kind of hungry, but he's part of our family, okay? That's just what it's like. Even animals do this, you know? Different kinds of animals that you used to think that, oh, they just kill each other, you know, they're just food to each other. You know, a hippo saves a giraffe, or even like a tiger protects a deer. I don't know if that's even possible, but what is possible, what I do see is, you know, if you raise even an alligator. There's this guy in Brazil who raised an alligator, a baby alligator that was injured and almost on the verge of death, and then he nursed it back to health, and then he can swim with it now. And you know, you could imagine that perhaps maybe that implies that, you know, it has feelings, and then that they grew a relationship in which it couldn't have, because normally a typical life of an alligator is that they're born in the swamp, this murky swamp, it's dark and gloomy, and they're by themselves. Their parents aren't there with them. They have no social life. They don't know affection. They don't know love or kindness. So then they're just a monster. You know, they don't have necessarily the sentiment of, I should treat you well, you should treat me well. It's just like, I'm hungry, I want to kill you, I want to eat you, because I don't know anything else. But then when you're raised, like the alligator is raised by that guy with affection and like social life and closeness, then you become like this domesticated animal. And you see even tigers, you know, if you approach a tiger that's living in the wild, you know, you should be careful, because they might just kill you because they're hungry, they consider you food, they don't know you, they've never seen you in their life. You're like a person that's never been part of their lives. Why should they care about you, right? But then a tiger baby, a baby tiger, baby bear that a person has since their infancy, and they nurse them, they feed them, they play with them, they have affection, intimacy, and love. They grow up to be their pet. They're domesticated. They're part of the family. That's the whole idea. They're part of the family, you know? So when I look at Adam and Eve, you know, whatever happened may have happened, but then I could just use that lack of detail to make my own story, to see a scenario and to ramify what could happen in a similar kind of case, where the only information you see is that, for instance, in the story of Cain and Abel, is that they're brothers and one's a farmer, one's a herder, right? It doesn't say that they're close. It doesn't say anything. There's no special information, and you can assume that the reason why there's such little information because there's such little interaction between the two. So with Adam and Eve, the only thing you can know about Eve is that, okay, she came out of Adam's rib, and then that's it. There's no love story. There's no history behind them. You know, maybe Eve was a stereotypical trophy wife where she didn't say anything, and then Adam didn't say much, and then they just didn't talk to each other, you know? Like, Adam didn't say, oh, what are you feeling, what are you thinking? He didn't care about her feelings or thoughts. And maybe Eve also just didn't care about Adam because, let's say, he was a provider, so then she was like a spoiled girl, like daddy's little girl or whatever, even though they're husband and wife. Maybe she was just like a, you know, a housewife where she didn't have to care about anything because everything was given to her. So they weren't being treated equally, you know? But it's all the same consistency, the idea of family, the idea of belonging, togetherness, society, community, closeness, love, attention. The same with even Adam, the same with Cain and Abel, you know, sibling relationship, husband and wife. So that's very interesting. It's like you evolve, like you go from the one subject to the next. Adam and Eve is like the story of husband and wife, the relationship, and how to look at it, what's missing, what needs to be there. And even if you go further back, the serpent versus God, it's like God is not a stranger. God is your family, but the serpent is the stranger, because God created Adam, so in a sense he gave birth to Adam. In a sense he's the father of Adam. Adam saw God and God saw Adam, and just as a baby, any kind of baby sees, the first thing that they see when they're born is like their mother, so that's their family, right? So then the same concept applies to Eve, where the first thing Eve sees is Adam, so Eve is her mom, in a sense. And in a sense also God. In a sense, Adam and Eve gave birth to God, because it's like, not to be lewd or anything or disgusting, but how a man's seed is taken out of him and put in a woman. God took this supposed seed out of Adam, this rib, and then instead of putting it in something, it's already in the world, let's say, and then it grew out like an embryo, and then, so if God is Eve's family and Adam's Eve's family, and then technically God and Adam are her mother, so they're the closest thing to her, and then suddenly this snake comes along that she's never seen before. How come she took the word of the snake over her own family? That opens up implications too. That also is consistent with the idea that perhaps the family was not close, because if they were close, isn't it reasonable to say that she would address this issue or bring this to attention to her own family who she's close with, rather than listening to a total stranger? And in the situation the case with God versus the serpent is like family versus stranger, friend versus foreigner. And in the case with Adam and Eve is a lesson of husband and wife, girlfriend and boyfriend, significant other. And then the next progression with Cain and Abel is the story of siblingry, the sibling relationship. It's all about attention, love, togetherness, socialism, as opposed to capitalism, or purely capitalism, or whatever you want to call it. Maybe capitalism's not the exact word, or socialism's not the exact word, but it's this concept that I'm sure you understand. And then when you get to like even Noah, I might be going off into a different idea, because I didn't really think it out that far. I did think it far. This is pretty deep, but this might be going off into a different topic, but you can always see a contrast as those examples I've made, even with Noah and the flood. You contrast Noah with the rest of the world, and that the rest of the world died and was wicked. All they thought was wickedness toward each other, to do wicked and to do harm. But Noah, apparently, it's implied that he wasn't like that, but he was righteous in his generation. And then he has children, so he has Japheth, Shem, and Ham, and then there's a contrast within those siblings too, that Ham was like a disgrace. He was like shameless, where he just stared at his dad when his dad was naked and didn't cover his dad up. He just stood there, just glared at him, almost like a pervert, almost like a psycho, right? But his brothers, they had some kind of dignity. They had some kind of, honor, and they had shame in a sense that they didn't look at the nudity, and they backward walked and covered their father's nudity. They had this dignity to them. Also, if you go into the story of Isaac, Isaac and well, I could even assume or just imagine that Abraham, somehow I read that Abraham had an older brother. Okay, let's just assume that he did. And how do I make the story consistent to the idea that this pattern that we're going along. What if I said that Abraham's brother wouldn't have done what Abraham did, which was once Abraham had this huge army and then he was powerful, he had a lot of stuff, but then he decided to obey God and to be quote unquote, let's say he humbled himself by, instead of having this army and having all of these riches, he went to the desert with just Sarah and with just like a couple of camels. That's pretty humbling, in my opinion. Maybe I could just, if the pattern is continuing, I could say, oh, maybe that means there is something in contrast to Abraham where the other thing wasn't like that, where they wouldn't have humbled themselves or done something like that because they would have felt too high and mighty about it, or they wouldn't have faith, because Abraham's called the father of faith, and God merits him for having a lot of faith. So much so that he was willing to sacrifice his most loved thing. It's not, I feel like the story of Isaac's binding less about the fact that you're sacrificing a human, because he didn't really sacrifice the human. It was just a test. I mean, it just so happened that, Abraham's most prized possession was Isaac, because, that's not hard to imagine. You love a person, you love, a person more, and your family, your son more than like a thing, like a statue or like gold. So then there would have been no test, no proof or sacrifice if he just sacrificed like this thing he didn't care about, which is why God stopped Isaac from being killed, because like, I didn't want you to kill a person. That's just crazy. I just want to see your level of like love for me and your level of sacrifice. But no, I don't want you to kill people. That's not part of my, you already know this. Like, forget the idea that, put aside the idea that like Abraham somehow managed to muster up the mind and the heart to like actually sacrifice his child. I don't know how that happens. I'm sure there are reasons, but that's the point where it's like, it's kind of like it's like a humiliating thing. It's like a humbling thing. Like, if I had something that I really liked, I mean, even on a basic superficial level, some people, they're too proud to get rid of their clothing, their flashy clothing, or their flashy car. They don't want to drive around an old caravan. They want to drive around a BMW. They want to walk around in shiny clothing. They don't want to walk around in like Reeboks or like New Balance shoes. They're too proud. They don't want to humble themselves. How much more so can you say that someone's humble if not only they do that, but like they realize that that's nothing anyways. That's child's play. What's hard is to make yourself actually poor, where you don't even have the person that you love so much, like your own child or your own wife or something. I mean, maybe your own wife would be too far with Abraham, but then there's the story of Job, where he even loses his wife, not only his kids. That's like, so like after Abraham is his son, right? Isaac and Ishmael. And depending on how much you know about the story, or how many sources you read from, like in the Jewish sources, they have like a wealth of lore behind both Isaac and Ishmael. And the lore goes that, Ishmael was kind of arrogant. It also says that about Hagar, even in the plain Bible, like Hagar was elated, like almost to the fact where she would be raising her chin, raising her nose towards Sarah, like making fun of her, mocking her. And I can see that. And I can see why this kind of moral immorality or this wickedness had to be separated. And so God was like, yeah, listen to your wife. And then he sends Hagar and Ishmael away. And Ishmael and Isaac, they're two different things. Like, even on the basis of names alone, Ishmael is to mean like to listen or whatever, which is closer to like obedience, like just plain obedience, not because you love someone or whatever, you're just listening to them. But the name Isaac, pronounced Yitzchak, is actually like to laugh or to play. And you can imagine how they can be the antithesis of each other. In one hand, Ishmael is someone who obeys out of mere obedience, not conscientiously, not like out of love or happiness. But Yitzhak, to laugh, is like, I do it because I love it. I do it because I love you. I do it because, I enjoy it. It's genuine. It's like genuine. It's like a family versus a slave, or like a family versus an employee. Employee who just works for the money, doesn't care about you, doesn't like you, isn't a nice person. So I didn't think about this before, but I'm going to try to see how the consistency still applies and continues. So Isaac had two sons, Esau and Jacob. So, since this consistent, continuance of this idea of not closeness or closeness, love, attention, when I look at Jacob and Esau, I could imagine Jacob in the whole description of his life and how he is that, he's a listener. He listens to people. He's more respectful socially. He's more loving. He cares about your feelings and your thoughts. I can see Esau as a person who, rather than listening to people, just says what he wants and just tells people what to do. As a matter of fact, in the story of him selling his birthright, and rabbis agree with this, that Esau, the way he said it, the way he spoke to to Jacob, is give me, he ordered Jacob, disrespectfully, like he was his slave, like he was his inferior. Give me, make me some food. He didn't say, oh, I'm really hungry, could you do me a favor, make me food? And maybe he was too tired to, make it for himself, and he said he was gonna die. But if you were that desperate, wouldn't you just do it yourself? But let's give him the benefit of the doubt. Let's say he was dying. But I actually have to doubt that. Let's just say he wasn't dying, because basically it's he was telling Jacob to do something for him. And there are reasons why you can assume that we can't give him the benefit of the doubt, and that he was actually in the worst case scenario rather than the good case scenario, because further on, what happens is he sells his birthright, right? And then not only that, but at the time of the birthright, at the time of the blessing of his father, giving Esau the blessing, Esau didn't say anything. He didn't say that he sold his birthright to Jacob. He didn't say, oh, Dad, you should bless Jacob. He was almost lying. He almost didn't respect his own word. That shows the kind of person he is. Now, I don't want to get off into a different subject, because I got into a different subject to show that Esau was a different person in a different way. But what right now, I just want to see how this guy, his personality reflects the consistent idea that, he wasn't close with his family, or that he didn't get attention, or this is what happens when you don't have the proper society or the proper social relationship or mannerisms. And I feel like someone who doesn't listen but just does things, it does show something. You can see things from that. You can imply things from that. Why is it that you don't listen but you just say things? Maybe you were given all these things. Maybe you were a person who were just given things, and then whenever you asked for it, you were given it. So then you knew that all you had to do is say, and then it will be done for you. It will be given to you. And you had no reason to listen. Because, you never had an obstacle in your way to get what you want, right? And it's not hard to imagine that Isaac did this for Esau, that perhaps he did this wrong thing about just giving things to Esau, and he didn't realize the detrimental effect it had to simply give everything that your son asks and spoiling them. Because Jacob isn't like that. And as a matter of fact, when his mother
Rebecca tells Jacob out of foresight, out of knowledge that Esau is just a wicked child and that he doesn't deserve the blessing. Even when Rebecca tells Jacob to do this thing, which is like try to get the blessing from his father, instead of going, yeah, I totally hate Esau and like I'm right on, I'm the same page as you, he actually shows this kind of respect, this kind of like consciousness. He's like, but you know, are you sure about this? Like, what if he finds out that, you know, he's talking to the wrong child and like I get a cursing instead of a blessing, and like depending on the person, maybe if it was Esau in that position, he wouldn't even have cared about that. He would have just gone for it, like without respect, without even care. But I just see this like it just all makes sense. It all relates to each other. The fatherlessness, even if you have a father, that there's no relationship, there's no love, there's no attention. Even with Adam and Eve, it's like in a husband and wife relationship, of course, if you neglect and abuse, or you don't even talk to each other, you don't have a life together, but you live separate lives, then of course it's going to be that way. And you even hear people talking about, people, quote unquote, you know, divorce, or like they think about other people because, you know, sometimes it's an illegitimate reason, they're just adulterers, but sometimes it's a legitimate reason that their partners are actually not very nice to them, and then they don't even know why they're together. Like the sex just isn't enough or something, because everyone looks good. There's a lot of people who look attractive, and a lot of people know how to have sex. And also with Cain and Abel, the relationship of siblings or even neighbors. I guess the story of Noah and the rest of the world is a story of neighbors, right? And the story of Ham and Shem and Japheth is like the story of honor. Abraham is like the story of faith and humility. Isaac is a story of like, again, kind of like humility and like genuine love rather than like pride. Jacob versus Esau also shows a contrast of like humility and sincere love and care about a person's feelings, to be a listener, to be like this person who's like doesn't just tell people what to do or just say things, but like listens. Even when Jacob goes to his uncle, what happens is his uncle is like a liar. He like manipulates Jacob. So that's like a related story about not being close. Like, you don't do that to someone who you're close to, right? There's something wrong with you if you're doing that. Like, he doesn't want to give his daughters away. He pretty much manipulates Jacob into working 7 years like a machine, like a workhorse. And he's like, oh, I'm sorry, I gave you the wrong daughter. Or, you know what, I didn't tell you this, but actually you wanted Rachel, but since she's my second daughter, you have to work a second 7 years because, I can't give you away Rachel without giving you away Leah first. So this is like dishonesty. This is like stealing knowledge, as they say in Hebrew, right? You swindle somebody. And this is not something you would do to someone who you were that close with, who you had that much love together with. Because technically speaking, yeah, they don't know each other. Jacob came out of nowhere. But even if that was the case, like if Laban was in a good relationship prior to meeting Jacob, perhaps he wouldn't have done that, period. And then when Jacob has children, what happens is that his sons sell Joseph because they're jealous of him, basically. Because, not only
is Joseph's father, Jacob. Not only does Jacob favor Joseph like he's his favorite son for whatever reason, he gives him attention and loves him. And, not only that, so not only are his brothers like looking at this and like they feel left out, like the third wheel, because Joseph's getting all the attention, but after that, Joseph's sharing this dream where he's saying, oh, I was a king, everyone worshipped me. Like, even though it was just a dream, like that was like the cherry on top, where people who see, this is the same idea, the concept of attention. They didn't get the attention, they feel left out, they feel like a third wheel, they feel like they're missing out on something, they're not getting the love or affection that they need or want from their father. Because even if you are getting something, if someone is getting more of it, like in the case of a relationship, it's like divided attention, it's like competition. If it kind of goes into this tangent of the idea of polygamy. If you have multiple wives and multiple husbands, you're gonna make everyone jealous. It's not a good thing. You're not supposed to have, like, how are you gonna give undivided attention to all of them? You're not gonna be able to. The more time you spend with someone else, that's time spent that you're not spending with that other person. It's just not fair. And again, you're gonna create Dahmers that way. You're gonna create women like that other girl. There's this girl who, was being spoken to by a Mormon Latter-day Saint missionary. And, I can see how that could have happened where she killed a guy. One way is because the guy took advantage of her, and maybe he didn't do it intentionally the whole time, but like in the midway of this kind of proselytizing, he like succumbed to some kind of temptation. Like he used his like speech and his like missionary work kind of approach to like get sexual with this woman. Or maybe she tempted him because she came from a dark past and she couldn't trust people and she wanted to see what kind of person he was, and she tempted him to say like, oh, you want to do this thing with me? And like she probably sees this person, like if this guy was just a straightforward 100% all the time, like pure saint kind of person, like pure and just like was on a straight path, then perhaps she wouldn't have killed him. Or if he wasn't a missionary, he wasn't a proselytizer, and he was just like a random guy who was honest and said, yeah, I just want, I want sex, I'm not a bad guy, I just, what can I say? I just want sex. And yeah, maybe if it was like that, then also she wouldn't kill him because like, oh, he's not a liar. He's genuine, whether he's like a normal, uninteresting, unimpressive person, or he is a great person. As long as you were genuine, as long as you were true, you weren't fake, you weren't scamming me, then, oh, now I can trust you. She could have had a history where she couldn't trust people stabbed her in the back, manipulated her, abused her, raped her, and then, so she tested this guy out, and then he ended up showing to be a flake, like he was shaky. He wasn't like 100% this pure saint missionary. He wasn't 100% making himself out to be just like a normal guy or just like an unimpressive, horny guy. Because if he was either one of those things, maybe she would have not killed him. But then they engaged in like anal sex outside in public in a tree or something, that story goes, and then I see that's like my rationale behind why she killed him. This is my rationale. This is what I see behind the context behind a Dahmer or Ted Bundy or a Manson or Cain or I mean, it's not hard to imagine, to understand the story behind Joseph and his brothers. And you might say that it escalated and it's like crazy that they sold him. I mean, maybe back in the day, it wasn't that crazy. Like, life is harsh and reality is harsher than it is now. Like, now we have computers and we have kind of softer lifestyles, and that just
plays into us being more sensitive or more having time to think about other things. Like if you're not worried about survival and like fending off animals and getting scorpion bites on you, you can concentrate on other things like empathy or whatever. And if it was harder for you before, it's easier for you now, even if you were like not that great of a person, even if you're not that impressive of a moral human being or a citizen. Like now you have less things to worry about, so you could actually like help people out. Like sometimes people help other people out because like they have nothing to do and they're bored and they're so well off that that it's like nothing to them. But you know, depending on what kind of person they are, if they were in a rough situation, they wouldn't be that way. They wouldn't be helping them, and they wouldn't even care about people. So, so like the contrast with Joseph and Judah, or Jacob, Joseph versus his brothers is interesting because Joseph, you know, he was sold by his brothers. He was betrayed. He was basically like abandoned, and he has to live with that. He lived through that for many years and became a man. He grown up and then he became a king. Now he was the one with power, and then suddenly his brothers were in a situation where they were little. They were the little brothers, and they were at the mercy of Joseph's hands, rather than Joseph, the little brother, being at the mercy of his big brother's physically bigger hands, right? But then, of course, the difference is, like the contrast is, with all the power and the position that Joseph was in, instead of doing what they did to him, to his brothers, instead of like selling them away to some slave owner or like doing whatever he felt like to them, you know, he cried. He ran in the back, he cried, and he just wanted to say, you know, I forgive you and I love you, you're my family. And he just wanted to see his brother and his dad. And then his brothers, you know, they cried. You know, I like to think of that story as like a rectification story. Because the Jews, you know, Jewish people, you know, this Judaism, they're actually called after Judah, his name, because, you know, even though Judah was like complicit at the time in selling his brother, you know, accomplice to his brothers, you know, instead of holding spite or grudge or whatever, like this is the imagery I have, like he ended up going to retrieve Joseph, and it's, I think, in rabbinical lore, like, or even in the Bible, the plain normal Bible, like he took the initiative and said, Dad, I'm gonna go out and get Joseph for you. And then, so it's like almost like doing what a grown-up does, like being the bigger person and saying, I'm gonna put this aside, like I'm gonna stop being childish and immature. It's almost like he repented. It's like, compare that with Cain. Cain, you can say he didn't have time to repent, or he just didn't repent at all. He just killed his brother. But like the brothers, they decided not to kill him, but to sell him for whatever reason. But again, like Judah, he went from hating his brother to selling him to saying, you know what, I'm going to bring him back and I'm going to do it for my dad. And you know, he could have held spite and said, no, I don't want to do that. I hate you. You care about him so much. You don't care about us. And, you know, he could have been jealous and envious and have the sibling rivalry thing consume him, but he didn't, you know. It could have gone another way. And for some reason, Jews are called after Judah because he's, you know, he exemplified some kind of exceptional righteousness or some kind of goodness that is notable, like praiseworthy. They're not called Abrahamites. I mean, they're also, but they're not called ultimately Abrahamites. They're called Jews. And Israelis are called Israelis. Because even Israelis and Jews are different. Like Jews are special. Judah is special compared to Jacob. There's a story that says that Jacob is greater than Abraham and Isaac is greater than Abraham. But I like to say that Judah is greater than Jacob. It's almost like this progression, like from the beginning of time, you have Adam and then it progresses to Abel. And like little by little, they add on this like good quality. And then by the time you get to like Judah, it's like you're like this complex, moral, righteous personality with like a conscious. Because when you see Abel, like you say like he's not evil, but you don't really say that he's righteous or good. He's just just. He's just there. He's like an innocent person. An innocent person is not necessarily a righteous person or a brave person who demands justice, like a powerful person of authority. He's just like a sheep. He's just there. Like, I didn't do anything wrong. I'm just like a civilian. But when you get to the point of Judah, it's like he actually, and Jacob, Israel, quote unquote, to wrestle with God. It's like you're more than just an innocent person. You're more than just a civilian. You're more than just like this harmless animal. You're actually like a thinker. You are an enforcer of law. You're like a pursuer of righteousness. You are a defender of justice or whatever like that. It's like it's more than that. But yeah, it's like, so you have this development of a personality and culture, because if you have more bad culture, you're going to be bad, right? If you have good culture, you're going to be good. So it's like you see the split of like the development of bad culture versus good culture, the evolution, and like the strengthening of evil versus the strengthening of good. But also, if you have absolutely no culture, then you're just subject to the elements. You're vulnerable to influence and culture. You're practically going to fall into the evil culture. And that even relates to the idea of attention, relationship, love, togetherness, community, society, family, how you treat each other, how you participate, are involved, and you include each other instead of being strangers, being neighbors who are strangers, being a government or a society that's just pure capitalist, strangers and prostitution, not like wholesome family togetherness and like interaction and involvement and inclusion and assistance with like matchmaking people, making sure people aren't living alone. Because God says it's not good for man to be alone. It's not good for a person to be alone. And again, that just consistent with the idea, you're going to create these Dahmers, these Cains, these Esau's. You're going to create these women who kill these missionaries. And you think that it's at random. You think that there's no explanation, but there is an explanation. It's because there's separation, because there's no good culture, because there's a lack of good culture and there's a presence of bad culture, because there's no inclusion, there's no relationship, husband and wife.